Welcome, June Cross. We are so happy to be joined by you today. Happy and honored. Thank you so much for making the time for us to discuss this incredibly important film, Wilhemina's War.
Sure, thank you for having me.
We are honored. So the film, which our audience will be watching after this interview, is why everybody's here today. But what's so interesting is how you got to the point in your life to where you discovered Deschal and Wilhelmina. You were raised in Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about your early years, your education, and what drove this interest in telling people's stories?
Well, I wanted to be a journalist, really. I started in news, and I worked in the news business at the PBS NewsHour and at CBS News, and even before that, in local news up in Boston, for the better part of 25 years. And I was doing daily news, really. And then at some point, God, when was this? In 93 or so, I guess. I told my executive producer and I were having lunch, and I had I made the mistake, or I had the fortune to start telling him about my own life story, which was that I'm what they call now biracial, although I actually never really identified that way. But my mother is white, my father was Black. They met in New York in the early 50s in the United States, when actually interracial marriage was still illegal in many places in this country. The Loving decision hadn't come down yet. I was born. My parents split up shortly thereafter. My dad was he was an entertainer also, and having a hard time making a living as an entertainer during that transition from the stage to television. And my mother couldn't raise me on her own, or couldn't figure out a way to raise a Black child on her own as a white woman living in New York, which was supposed to be, supposedly the liberal capital of the world. It wasn't that liberal in the early 50s. So she left me to be raised by some Black friends of hers in Atlantic City, New Jersey, who I came to call Aunt Peggy and Uncle Paul. And really, that experience, I was jokingly talking with another friend of mine the other day, and I said, I think all journalists to some degree are working out whatever their personal subconscious things are. And mine seems to be, I have a penchant for doing stories about people who are in a tough situation and abandoned by the government. So being in a tough situation and abandoned by one's mother or the government or the authorities seems to be a theme that has run through all of my films, starting with that first one, which was called Secret Daughter, which told the story of me and my mom and my dad and my stepdad and our very complicated family. She remarried the actor Larry Storch, who recently died just last July.
Were you still in contact with Larry?
Oh yeah, my mom died in 2003, and then Larry began to develop memory issues, and I became his power of attorney for 15 years. Basically, I was taking care of him.
So your documentary about your own life, Secret Daughter, a mixed race daughter and the mother who gave her away, was released on PBS in 1996. And that also, you were awarded a DuPont Award and Emmy. Is that correct?
And an Emmy, yeah. Yeah.
How did it feel? External acknowledgement can be wonderful. And also it can challenge us. How did it feel for you telling everybody about your mother and your stepfather, introduced you as their adopted daughter.
I became a journalist because I wanted to make a difference in the world. I made a conscious choice not to go into Hollywood film making because I felt like I couldn't, the lies, for obvious reason, the lies were more than I couldn't be able to get up in the mirror and look at myself every day.
Yeah.
The truth was always, actually, you really can't make up, the things that you find in real life, you can't make this stuff up. But I ended up doing Wilhelmina's War, and I find a woman in the backwoods of South Carolina who's as strong as Wilhelmina is, and taking care of five family members and 2 additional friends who all have health problems, who are not being taken care of by the state. I mean, you can't make that stuff up,
And Wilhelmina herself.
Yeah. I mean, Wilhelmina, even though she is undereducated, was underemployed most of her life, couldn't read well. I remember at one point we went to it was in South Carolina, some kind of AIDS conference that they were having, and she didn't understand the words, but she understood all of the concepts that they were talking about. In fact, she had things to tell them about how the distribution of that current batch of drugs that people were trying to use to help people live with HIV were impacting folks who don't have stable access to housing, stable access to food, stable access to jobs, stable access to a car, transportation. I mean, there are all these things that intersect.
And your path to finding Wilhelmina, a part of that was understanding or finding the statistics that Black women ages 16 to 34 in South Carolina, their primary cause of death in 2009 was HIV/AIDS. I don't know the updated statistic. I can't imagine that it's wildly different, but
AIDS is no longer the primary cause of death among Black women, but the latest statistics that I've been able to find are something like 75% of the new cases of HIV are being diagnosed are among Black men. And that's 3 times as high as whites, twice as high as Latinx women. Black women have the highest rate among women at 24%. And even though there are drugs now that you can take to control it, they have side effects. Like all drugs have side effects. So it's not like you just take a pill and then stop. They have PrEP now that you can take to try to prevent it, and then they have another drug that you can take to try to live with it. But these are difficult. These can be difficult to manage for people who are living with HIV. I don't say that trying to dissuade anybody from taking the drugs, which I've been accused of, but it's just that the reality is that you have to eat 3 times a day, which means you have to have money to buy food 3 times a day, and healthy food. So it can be a challenge.
So that statistic in 2009 was a launch pad for you, looking for people to help tell this story. And can you talk to us about who you were first made aware of and how that came about?
We were sitting in the office of a group that was doing activist work around reproductive justice and gender issues in South Carolina. And they had a magazine. And in the magazine was an article by a 13-year-old named Deshawn Dix, who talked about what it was like living in a town of, I think she lives in a town of 3,000 people. And she had been born HIV positive, and how the stigma still attached itself to the idea of her living with HIV. Even though she doesn't have the full blown, because the medication was able to suppress it. But when you say HIV/AIDS, AIDS is the disease that happens when your T cell count drops below a certain point, and then your body begins to show all these other symptoms. So she'd been living with HIV, has been living with HIV her entire life, and she's now 26, 27 years old. But living in a small town where ignorance drives, persecution and isolation and shunning. That was what the article was about. And so we were in Columbia, South Carolina, and we drove down to Aiken, and we found Wilhelmina.
And so how did you earn or gain their trust to help tell this story of, at this time, HIV/AIDS could be treated with a single pill, and of course you delve into this in the film, and our patrons will find out more about that. But it really is, the story of generations afflicted by and left behind.
Every documentary filmmaker has this period where you're trying to gain the trust of the people, because it's really them that has to tell the story. And we made repeated trips to South Carolina, and I had a young associate, a former student of mine, Lisa Desai, who did a lot of that original footwork. And I think Lisa had been going down maybe for about 6 months before the first time I went, because I was teaching full time and I couldn't get a break. And she introduced me to Wilhelmina, and Wilhelmina and I hit it off right away. I mean, Wilhelmina's like really smart and very down to earth. And there was something about her that I just I just liked her. You can't do a film about somebody if you don't like them. So she and I became, as close to friends, sort of confidants, not really friends, because she had so much going on in her life. She had her daughter, Deschal's mom, who had developed full-blown AIDS and was then in a nursing home, and she was trying to get her out. And then she was also dealing with a teenager who's 13 years old, who's beginning to grow out of that sort of childhood, and really is in her teenage years, becoming a young woman and realizing what it means to actually live with this condition, and how do you go on a date? How do you tell anybody that you're not going to kill them? I know that they can breathe the same air as you, that they can touch you. I mean, there's so many different complicated things that Deschal was going through. So Deschal told me recently that she considered me her second mother. Wilhelmina is her first mother, and then I'm her second mother. So,
wow, what an honor.
Yeah.
And where is Deschal now?
She's still living in Williston, South Carolina, and she's working in a factory there. She had wanted to become a cosmetologist, and I've been encouraging her to go back to that dream.
And she's married now?
She's married, yeah. She got married last May. I was attending another wedding and couldn't make it down there. But yes, she got married last May to a woman that they've been in a relationship with each other for 3 or 4 years now.
Is Wilhelmina still caring for multiple family members and friends?
She's not, Wilhelmina, last time I talked to Wilhelmina, we were sharing stories about getting older and the various aches and pains that afflict you as you enter your late 60s. Wilhelmina's about 3 years older than I am. So a lot of those folks have unfortunately passed on. Her husband passed while I was making the film. Her husband passed, her daughter passed, a cousin that she had been caring for passed. So there was just a lot of loss. And then one of her sons was killed totally randomly in a drive-by kind of situation. So she experienced a lot of loss during that period that I was making the film. And there sort of is no upside to loss, but one of the things was it took the burden of having to care for all these people off of her shoulders. So now the things that she cares for the most are the flowers in her garden, and she has a beautiful, beautiful garden.
do you suspect that the roles will change as she continues to get older, and will Deschal care for Wilhelmina?
I'm sure she will. She still lives on the property. Wilhelmina had there's like the whole family lives in an area, this area outside of outside of Williston, and they all live in trailers, and Wilhelmina gave Deschal her own trailer when she got married. So Deschal now has a trailer that's literally like, I don't know, about maybe half a football field away from where her grandmother lives. So she's still there.
Yeah.
And even on the days when they're not talking to each other, she knows what's going on. So, yeah.
And this film, the film was shot over 5 years, or the
Yeah.
story was made over 5 years, and funding took about 6 years. And that was that was the reason that it was made over so many years.
Yeah, there was one year that I wrote 25 grants and all of them got rejected.
Wow.
Because people want feel-good stories. I was just reading an article about this last night, that even though we allegedly now live in this golden age of documentary, people still want documentaries that either have a happy ending or are about celebrities, or it's a true crime, docuseries, and this was none of those. This was a film about people struggling against a system that ultimately didn't care about them. And I know one of the things that disappointed Wilhelmina the most was she was hoping that the documentary would force some change, and nothing changed. And that was hard for both of us, because I just couldn't, you can't, one film is not going to change an entire system. South Carolina is the cradle of the Confederacy, and there's so much there that's so ingrained that one documentary isn't going to be the thing that changes it.
Yeah, I think this is one of the reasons that we believed it's so important to give your film this time, is because we understand that despite progress, HIV continues disproportionately to affect Black people in this country, and prevention and treatment are not reaching the people who need it most. If you don't mind, can we pivot to Columbia University?
Oh, sure.
So
Yeah.
you are, as I mentioned in the introduction, you are the founder of the documentary program at Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism in New York City. Talk to us about this program, when it was founded, what you are really proud of it producing, and what you hope that it continues to do.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, let's see. I founded the program actually around the same time that I started working on Wilhelmina's War. So the first year of the program was 2009. We do probably 8 to 16 students a year get admitted to the program. They have to apply for it when they apply to the school. And we have a special track for them from the beginning. We've graduated about 150 students thus far, all of whom are working, I'm glad to say. Somewhere in the, if they're not working as independent filmmakers, they're working in the journalism business writ large somewhere, for a newspaper or one of the networks or somewhere. They go through they do a film in 52 weeks. So we have 52 weeks to teach them how to shoot, edit, report a film, go out, find the participants who are willing to be in the film. And then they graduate technically in August. And then in December, we have a documentary film festival, to which they invite everybody. We usually have a couple of hundred people who come every year. And this year we just finished our 13th, I believe this is the 13th class.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's been rolling right
do you
along.
stay in regular contact with your students?
Not with all of them.
Yeah.
You know, like I think all teachers have students they get close to, and then other students who, you know,
And
just sort of pass
150
through.
people is a lot to
Yeah.
keep track of.
Yeah. But
So do you pay close attention to the Academy nominated documentary films?
I do, yeah. The Academy and both Sundance and the Academy. Two
And
things.
do you see the Academy is made up of a specific body of people, and they are the ones voting. Do you see changes?
Oh, yeah, there's been a lot of change. There's been a lot of change in the past 5 years, I want to say, since the sort of Oscars so white hashtag. Yeah, almost all of my friends are in the Academy. I'm not in it because I don't do feature documentaries like that, and also because I have a job at a university. So if in order to be in the Academy, you have to be a full-time documentary filmmaker.
Yeah.
But I have many, many friends who are there voting members of the Academy.
And in 2022, was there a documentary that you saw that really moved you, compelled you, that you really thought was important?
There were two, actually. They were both nominated. One is called All That Breathes, about these two brothers in India who actually care for birds, for wounded birds. And it's just a beautiful documentary about the interconnection of life and the environment, and all that breathes.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful, beautiful film. And the other one is All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. So Nan Golden is a artist in her own right who had done a lot of work around sexual freedom and a sexual revolution in New York in the 80s, and herself became addicted to Oxycontin, and has gone on a campaign against the Sackler family to get them to pay in some real way for the damage that they've done to the American public and everyone who's gotten addicted to that drug. And so the documentary weaves the story of Laura doing the film and Nan's effort to try to bring the Sackler family to justice.
Yeah.
Those two films, I think, and probably Laura's is the more important film, but if I had to bet, because the Academy is the Academy, they're going to go with All That Breathes. But yeah, and so both of them have the word all in the title. So it's sort of like All That Breathes and then All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. So it's,
We'll keep our eye on both. It has been wonderful to have the opportunity to talk with you, your personal history, your career, creating careers for people at Columbia University is all just really amazing work that you're doing. We're grateful for your time. Thank you for making this story about Wilhemina and her family. You don't need to be told this, of course, because you lived it, but it is such an incredibly important story to move forward, and we are proud to have it on our screen. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for screening this film.
Absolutely.
Please, everyone, go out and help the Wilhelminas out there.